this meeting to order, beginning with the determination of a quorum. Mr. Clerk.
Yes, there is a quorum. Tom Casper and Jerry Robichaud are absent.
That's not quite true.
Tom's here.
Tom Casper is here.
Sorry, Howard Bodie and Tom and Jerry.
Thank you.
I'm backwards.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
It's nice to be mistaken for somebody with hair.
We'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We can probably let the minutes reflect that our clerk is absent at this time, so I have asked Ms. Deb Davis to step in as clerk for the evening until Howard Bodie arrives this evening. So with that, our first item is to approve the agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda at this time.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as shown. Any discussion on this item? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, next then is recognitions and awards. So this evening we do have an award. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Sesker to tell us about that.
Yes, well, thank you. We have a nice award once again to recognize our Minnesota School Bus Operators Association, Transportation. I think I'm going to have Garrett come up, our Transportation Director, and introduce Bob.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy and honored to present Bob Janes here. He is our 22nd consecutive MSBOA Transportation Specialist Award winner. Bob has driven for 18 years and has done a great job. He fills in as a sub driver, so he knows pretty much all of our routes and can jump in at any time with not a lot of notice to get those done. He's driven special ed, regular ed. He's driven motor coach, charter trips, extracurriculars. He does a little bit of everything. So he has done a great job for us. I don't know where we'd be without him, and he's been a great reflection on our other drivers and the community or the industry as a whole, and the Faribault community as well. So it's great to see all the letters that came through helping Bob through the nomination process. Many of those individuals are in here as well, which we'd like to thank those individuals for helping out. And Bob definitely has earned this, and we're very happy and proud to welcome Bob Janes.
I wish to thank everybody here, as well as Garrett and the Transportation Company, and all the way up to Minnesota School Bus Operators Association for the award I was given. It was a surprise when Garrett mentioned it, and fantastic. And for a job that, or an award for a job that I like to do. And I do what I love to do and love what I do. So, and it was very pleasantly surprising to get this award. And I thank everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Janes, on behalf of the board, congratulations. I guess I'll speak not just as a board member, but also as a parent. You know, when we send our kids to schools and they go on field trips and they end up on those buses, you know, it makes us feel so much more secure to know that we have outstanding people running those buses and making sure that our children are safe at those times and that they're well cared for, not just at school, but on their way to and from school. So on behalf of everyone on this board and in this district, thank you very much for your service, and thank you very much, Garrett, for bringing this to the board this evening. Thank you.
I did fail to mention there will be a $1,000 scholarship donated by the MSBOA that will be handed out next year to a Faribault High School student as well. So that will be in Bob James' name as well. So.
Fantastic. That's great. outstanding. All right, next on the agenda is community comment. This is a time for any members of the public to come forward and address the board. There's a 3-minute limit per speaker and a 15-minute limit per topic. If there are any members of the public who would like to come forward at this time, please feel free to do so. All right, seeing no members come forward, we'll move right along with the agenda then. Next up is the consent agenda. The consent agenda are items approved by one motion from the board. It is not an item for discussion, but any item can be removed by a request of any board member. Are there any requests to remove any items from the consent agenda at this time? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
Tom Casper,
Aye.
myself, I, Yvette. Aye. Richard
Aye.
and Jason.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Next up, curriculum. There is no curriculum committee report this evening, but there is a technology update. I'm assuming Colleen will bring that to us.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to just kind of give you a very quick report with technology. We are happy to announce that we have all of our members now on our tech team. So we have finalized our hiring, and I might be a little bit on the board later to consent to that. And the other thing that we want to share with you is our Felcom Academy. That went very, very well. We had many teachers that came in on some very nice summer days and spent some time learning and having some great experience with the technology. And I have to say, it went very, very well. We had many of our own staff doing the trainings, and we had staff that came for one and ended up staying or coming back the next few days. So we were very excited as to how that went, and hopefully we'll either do it in August or we'll do it again next year. So it went very well.
Great.
That's my update.
Thank you, Colleen. Do you know, Colleen, what fraction of our teachers participated in that first Falcon Academy?
You know what, I'd have to actually.
Roughly even? Was it a third? Was it half?
I'm not sure, there was a lot.
There was a lot
I know
of-
my
yeah.
class was packed.
See, we originally had everyone sign up, but people just started to show up. So, you know, and there was a limit of, I think we had a limit of 22 people in a room, and, you know, to be honest with you, it was hard to tell just because of the fact that they did just, you know, they stayed and they filled in holes, and they, you know, if they could sneak in, they tried. So I guess I don't have an accurate number, but Maria might have an active list, so I can ask her for next time.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. All right, thank you. Any questions for Colleen?
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Colleen. Next up is policy. We did have a policy committee meeting on June 10th. Is there a report at this time?
We're gonna be bringing forth some policies. The biggest one is the bullying policy. With all the changes legally and everything, it was quite a lengthy go through for all the changes that have come about. And then we have some rescinding to do also. But it went really well. We've still trying to get everything in place, but most of like I said, bullying was the biggest policy we dealt with, and a lot of language change. And it is actually one that we have to review annually now. That was one of the big changes to the policy.
Excellent. Deb, I see that we're rescinding a number of policies this evening, and normally we do that when we're adopting new ones to replace them, but that clearly is not the case for these. There's
No,
new
these are
ones
just
coming.
out of
They're
date.
just out of date. Are they redundant with
Yeah.
other things, or?
Well, some of them, actually, I think all three are just out of date.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yep, and actually, I think some of the practices from the ones that we're rescinding aren't what we're doing right now, so.
There's no need to replace them in any fashion? or-
Absolutely, no, we can't really, it doesn't correlate with state statute.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. All right, any further questions about the report before we move on to these items? Okay. This evening, we have 2 policies in front of us for first reading. For those watching, just to explain, policies come before the board in 2 stages. First, at a first reading, in which the board can discuss these policies, and then at the next board meeting, they can come up for a second reading, at which time they can be adopted. So these 2 policies in front of us this evening are for our first reading, which means we'll be discussing them, but there will be no action at this time to adopt them. Those 2 policies are Policy 514, the bullying prohibition policy, and Policy 407, employee right to know exposure to hazardous substances. Any comments on these particular policies before we have questions on them, or?
I will make one more
Sure.
comment about the bullying policy. It was also put into law that the policy in its entirety has to be in every handbook. So the handbooks for the elementary schools have to have it in entirety too, which was something different.
Interesting. It's not a
for
short
us.
policy either.
No, it is not.
It's an entire 10-page policy has to be
Yep.
in the handbook.
And is it just standard that the principal is the building report taker? That's just the most best practice that we decided, or was that part of the discussion?
Yeah, and that's, of course, where the paperwork will come in. That will be added, paperwork for the principals to do that, or their designee in that building. But yes, they will be the ones that will be responsible for that.
Any other questions? I'm curious, did we not have something related to hazardous substances before this policy 407? Or is there something that we'll be rescinding?
Well, the previous policy is this is just a quick modification of the previous policy.
Okay.
It's just new statutes that
So
have
this is
updated.
not
So
a new,
basically,
this is not a new policy we haven't had in place, it's just a slight
Correct.
revision of one
Yep.
that we have in place?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some word change and stuff.
Okay.
I did have one more question,
Yeah,
Brian
please
Bully.
do.
When it talks about ever needing a third-party investigator, is there a plan on what that would be, or any concept of what that could be? If you needed someone else to investigate bullying incident?
yep, go ahead, Deb.
We talked a lot about this, and it just, every situation you have to take as it comes. So there might be a need where somebody else has to come in, and be more like at the high school than anyplace else. I don't remember what else we said, Todd.
The normal protocol is that the principals still do the investigating just like they have in the past, but if there's a third party, it'll probably be me or Nicole, or we'll bring a liaison officer in to do that investigation independently. So, and we actually do that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'd be similar to what's
Yeah,
being
very
done.
similar to what we're already doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions on these 2 policies? All right, hearing none, as I said, there's no action to be taken this evening. If there are any suggestions from the board for revisions to these policies, please make sure to get them to the policy committee as soon as possible so they have time to act on that before the next meeting. But with that, then we will move on to item 7C, rescission of the following policies. Those policies are policy 404.6, professional meetings. This was originally adopted in 1975. Policy 405.5, the public service, adopted in 1977. And policy 454, hours of work, which I don't have a date on. I mentioned the dates. So far, we've never rescinded a policy older than me, but we're close.
1976.
76,
Yes, 1976. So these are policies that have been in place for nearly 40 years, and we're eliminating. Questions or comments on these items? I'd be happy to entertain a motion to rescind all of these within one motion.
So moved.
We have a motion to do so. And a second to rescind, and I'll read them one more time. Policies 404.6, professional meetings, policy 405.5, public service, and policy 454, hours of work. Any questions or comments on any of these policies before we take action?
These were new when I was young.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Anybody else want to date them relative, date themselves relative to these policies?
Embrace elderhood.
Hearing none, all those in favor of rescinding these three policies signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all. Okay, next up is item 8A, Finance Committee Reports. Do we have a report this evening?
Well, I think most of the items we will be reviewing shortly. I can say that the Finance Committee was voted in support of the items as they're presented to you tonight, so be happy to see the presentations for the public here. I guess that's all I have to report at this time.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And so with that, we have a number of items for approval this evening recommended by the Finance Committee. Starting with item 8B, 8B1, the ICE Arena Agreement. Any questions or comments on this agreement?
Pretty standard.
Standard from the
Pretty
previous
standard.
year, yeah.
I don't believe there was an increase. Was there, Mr. Sesko?
Nope, it's remained the same.
Everything is the same. I make a motion?
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the ICE Arena Agreement. We have a motion.
So
I'll
moved.
take that as a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the ICE Arena Agreement. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all. Item 8B2, MA Billing Consultant Agreement and Confidentiality Agreement. Mr. Sesker, would you like to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, this is it's just a confidentiality agreement with the MA billing person, and so it's this one along with the next agreement that you're going to be reviewing will employ Teresa Romy, who has been our MA billing person since, 6 years now, I think. And we've seen that revenue steadily increase from 25,000 to almost, what do we have, about 400, $500,000 now. So she's done an excellent job. So for the amount we pay her, she's doing a great job. So both these are,
10% of that?
yeah,
Not even 10%.
they're separate motions, but they both tie into that job.
Right, and so that was my next question for you. So we have two items here, and probably can we act on them in one motion, but do we need to specify both things? Because I see, or let me just ask it this way, do we need to act both on the confidentiality agreement and the contract, or just the contract?
I think just the contract.
So
is
we're
all-
only acting on the contract.
Yeah.
The confidentiality agreement is something that she signs and that we're seeing.
Yes, that's correct.
But the contract is what we are voting on. Okay, I wanted to clear that up, thank you. All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2015 MA billing contract.
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion on this contract?
I guess I would just add that the fees did add to our budget and were an item that was important in looking at the budget, considering the amount that we may have lost because of the enrollment changes. So it was a significant amount and they did great service.
Right. Yeah, it's been my understanding that this is something that takes a considerable amount of expertise. That was tough to have internal, and so paying an external expert has paid for itself many times over, so it seems like a good decision to do that in this case. All right, any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor of the fiscal year 2015 MA billing contract, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same side. Motion carries. Thank you all. Okay, next we have the Rice County Family Services Collaboration Agreement. Superintendent, would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
This is this the agreement with the social workers? For the, oh, I'm sorry, yes, got the wrong one. Yep, so this is the agreement with the Reflections Program, correct, with the county. So, you know what, maybe Cheryl should come up here and explain it, that'd be
Would
easier.
you like to step forward? Yes. Thank you.
Gladly answer questions. This is our, an agreement that has to be rewritten and updated annually and, or at least every 2 years. There were some changes that we were made aware of through the audit that was done by the Department of Health Services. And so we did those changes in the agreement language. There were some minor things about what we can and cannot charge the county for space use during the school day or services that they provide. It has to be free to our students. We can charge though for the space that's used outside of the school day. They do provide, the mental health practitioners do provide mental health therapy to students and families outside of the school day or over the summer because it must be a 12-month program. So those are just some slight changes in the language in the contract.
Any questions for Cheryl? Hearing none, I'll end.
I'm
Sorry?
I was trying to put it together. There's been some, I'll just say political advertising in recent weeks, talking about undiagnosed or untreated mental illness among the student population, and I think they're referring to nationally.
Right.
Can you share any insight or information that you might have about our district?
Sure. The, as you said, nationally, there is a growing concern of undiagnosed mental health conditions in young children. And I think, as you've heard me speak to this over the last few years, we do see a growing population of students with mental health diagnoses and the need for mental health services to be available to them, whether it is for their families and for the individual student outside of the school day, or whether it's special education services that need to happen through the school day in order for them to access their instruction, both special education and regular instruction. So we do know it's a growing concern, and we do know it's a growing area of identification in special education as well. And that's why we have our day treatment center, because we know that getting early intervention services to students really makes a difference, helps students to gain the academic instruction and to stabilize things for the student and for their family. And we have a larger number of our students graduating because they're getting those services. So the next piece of that is that there are some changes in the children's therapeutic support services through DHS, and they are looking at having the schools actually be providing services in the school day, trying to help to manage that and help to have students have access to those services through the school day. So to make it easier for children to access it, their families to access it, so they're not missing as much school to go to appointments and such. So starting in July of 2015, we will be actually doing the MA billing for the mental health services rather than going through the county or other service providers for that. With that, that's the idea is that trying to open it up so that school districts have the ability to provide those services, contract with mental health providers that could maybe come in during the school day to access students and give them the support needed.
Currently, how are students who might be in need of these services identified or referred?
Well, we have our intervention process in place. We're also working on that on the behavioral end of it. We've been working on the reading, math, and writing portion, and also now working on the behavioral aspects of that, working on improving those trainings in the elementary schools for the behavior interventions. Then students, if they are showing that they have behavioral needs during the school day, they would be referred to a problem-solving team, And then interventions would be designed and then implemented in their regular education classroom or in the environment. Using our school social workers are usually a first person that is an interventionist, because they work both general education and special education. They can have that hands-on with the general education population. Our school psychologists also work as interventionists and helping teachers, and the teachers really on the forefront of that. They might also be then referred, their families referred or connected with other resources outside of school as well, if that's more appropriate for them.
If I'm understanding what you've just said to me, there are a whole variety of school staff positions that might make a referral, and then that would be followed up either through, the RTI process or counseling services, social work services, and so on.
Or referral to an evaluation for special education services as well.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think just to add a little bit to that too, we did start meeting with our social workers and the county, working together and meeting on a monthly basis to discuss some of these cases too. So we're also not just talking about school cases, but we're also talking about what's happening outside the school with these families.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Hearing no more discussion, we have a motion and a second? We do not. I will entertain a motion to approve the Rice County Family Services Collaboration Agreement.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the Rice County Family Services Collaboration Agreement. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item 8B4, the Northfield B 2.11 Facilitator Purchase of Services Agreement.
I'll just stay here and address that too. The
Thank
next
you.
couple are special education related. We have a person that works with us as our birth to 3 is really 211 service provider facilitator for the purpose of intake of students that are referred, or children, babies that are referred to us for possible evaluation and concerns over development. And so we have a contract with Northfield to share that person, and that person acts as our central point of intake for both districts for Rice County, and then helps to be that first person that contacts the families and to help those services to get started and in place and those evaluations to happen. Those, this position is covered through federal funds.
Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the Northfield Facilitator Purchase of Services Agreement. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, special education request for some additional FTEs. Please, go ahead.
With the changes in our population, or additional students that have come into the district, and or changes just from elementary to middle school to high school, lends itself to needing some increased supports. We have a large growing population of students at our high school that we need additional supports of a teacher, a 1.0 teacher. For our DCD stands for developmental cognitive disabilities, and SP is for severe profound. So this group of students is our most challenged group of students that have the most severe disabilities, and we'll have a larger group than we've had over the past years, or with also this group has more significant disabilities than we've seen, and a lot of behavioral and challenges as well. So that's the 1.0 for the high school. And then also our DCD mild moderate program at the middle school and high school also are seeing larger numbers, growing numbers, and that 0.4 just helps to offset those caseloads. And the caseloads for both of those groups of students is in Minnesota State rule as to what the caseload limits are for those students. And so we've reached that, and that's why we need to ask for the increase at this time. And then the 0.3 ECSE teacher at McKinley, that is for our autism classroom that is at the at the McKinley ECSE level. That classroom is in need of additional FTE to make sure that we are providing the hours of service, the intervention that is necessary for that group of students. And as well, that's kind of come about too, in part that we've done some reorganizing of our early childhood programs, and we've created more integrated programs at the site. And with that and with the shifting, it's caused a little need for a couple of FTE there as well.
Cheryl, this is one of my questions is when I see a 0.4 and a 0.3, will this be an increase in the hours of current staff, trying to hire some staff part-time? How hard is it to find special education staff part-time?
It's very difficult to find special education staff, especially part-time. The 0.3 actually creates a 1.0 position or a 0.9 position. So that we should be able to hire someone in that area, although ECSE teachers are harder to find. That is, just in general, special education teachers are becoming harder to find. So it's difficult to come in June asking for this FTE, but that's I think we still have a good chance of finding someone of quality.
So the hope here is that these FTE also sort of correlate with other FTE we have available already, such that we can
especially
hire people full-time or near full-time
Yeah.
to be able to recruit staff.
Yes, the 0.4, especially at the middle school, high school, we would try to combine that with other positions. We also have a 0.5 deaf and hard of hearing teacher vacancy right now, so that could be combined if we find the right person.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this item? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Cheryl. All right, next up, fiscal year 2013-2014 final budget and fiscal year 2014-2015 adopted budget. Who's going to walk us through that? I'm assuming Colleen, all right.
I'm going to
Please,
walk you
Colleen.
through it. Yes, you have two documents in your packet. One is a PowerPoint presentation, which I'll go over tonight. The other is a more detailed packet of information about the budget that we covered in great detail at the Finance Committee meeting, so I think the board members that were there are comfortable with that. But certainly if you have any questions about that, we can answer those. So as I'm going through this, feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions. So I think we've got it up and ready to go. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the funds that are accounted for in our district, take a look at our enrollment history and projections, and then talk about the final budget for this year, review some of the major budget assumptions for next year. You've got the list of all of them in your packet, but on the PowerPoint we've just got a few of the major ones. And then look at the adopted budget that we're proposing for next year. In our district we have these 6 funds: General Fund, Food Service Fund, Community Service Fund, Building Construction Fund, Debt Service Fund, and Trust Fund. So I'll just talk a little bit about what each of those funds does. The General Fund accounts for all of the K-12 educational activities. It's by far our largest fund. We account for co-curricular and extracurricular activities, district instructional and student support programs, superintendent, district administration, operations and maintenance, transportation, capital expenditures, all those things that go with running a school on a day-to-day basis. We have 15 different accounts in the general fund. Most of those are restricted, but we also have one unassigned, one committed, and one non-spendable. The food service fund, it takes care of all the financial activities of the district's food service program. This includes preparation and service of milk, breakfast, lunch, and breakfast and lunch meals and snacks. And we also then pay for equipment needs for the kitchens out of this fund. The Community Service Fund deals with all kinds of enrichment programs for any age level that aren't part of the regular K-12 education program. There are 5 components, each with its own fund balance, and those 5 components are early childhood family education, school readiness, adult basic education, community service activities such as preschool screening and non-public aids, and then community education, adults with disabilities, school-age care, youth development, youth services, driver education, and enrichment. The Building Construction Fund is a temporary fund that we use to record all operations of a construction program that was funded by the sale of the bonds. These expenditures can include general construction management costs, advertising for contracts, and then payments on those contracts for construction. This will be the last year for our Building Construction Fund. As you remember, about 5 years ago, we passed a $15 million bond issue to do a lot of deferred maintenance projects in the district. And now that $15 million will be spent with one final project that we're currently working on right now. The Debt Service Fund is where we record all our revenues and expenditures for our outstanding bonded indebtedness. I always talk about these as like our mortgage payments. Any borrowing that we've done, this is how we pay it back. The levies are calculated at 105% of our debt payments. That makes sure that we have enough money to make those payments when they come due. And then because of that 105%, we tend to build up a little bit of an excess fund balance there, and so that always comes back to the taxpayers. It gets recalculated every year as to what we need, and if there's an excess there, it comes back to the taxpayers. And then the final fund is the trust fund, and these are scholarships that are donated to the school. And these trusts can be expendable or non-expendable. Any questions on any of those funds? All right, the next slide shows our enrollment history and projections. And you can see that for many years, we have hung right at that 4,000 level, bounced up and up maybe 25 or 50 and down maybe 25 or 50. But then starting in 10-11, we did drop down to 3864, and that was when the STEM school opened, if you remember that. So that some of the kids from Faribault Public Schools ended up going to the Cannon River STEM School. And then we were pretty stable up until last year. We had another drop down to 3744, and that's about what we're anticipating for this year. And we're coming in pretty close to that mark. For next year, we're projecting about the same amount, 3735. Okay. All right, so let's look at some numbers for this year. In the general fund, we're starting out with about a $9.5 million fund balance. Our revenues are projected to be $42,845,000. Our expenditures at $42,806,000. So our fund balance will go up just slightly in our general fund. And that's all the funds that are included. Our food service fund, we're starting out at just under $400,000. Revenues of $1,958,000, expenditures of $1,877,000. So that fund balance is also projected to go up. Our community service fund, we started out with $184,000, revenues of about $2.1 million, expenditures of about $2 million. So our fund balance will also go up in the community service fund to about $279,000. Our building construction fund, we have about $77,000 left in there, and that's what we'll end up spending by the end of June, and so that fund will be at 0. And then our debt service fund, our fund balance is about $911,000. We have about $5.2 million in revenues, about $5.1 million in expenditures, so that fund balance will be a little over $1 million. And then our trust fund, currently sitting, the fund balance is at $6,000. We're expecting to take in about $4,000 there and spend about $3,500, so we'll actually have about $6,500 left there. Any questions on those fund numbers? Okay, then just some graphs. Go ahead.
Where does the trust fund revenue come from?
Those are scholarship donations.
Donations, typically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So somebody will donate $1,000 for a scholarship that might get spent out over 1 or 2 or 3
Not
years.
state money that comes in any
No.
fashion.
Okay, Okay, the next slide shows the expenditures by fund, so that you can see that our general fund is by far the largest fund that we spend money out of, 82%. So the next two slides look at more detail of the general fund. On the next slide, you can see the revenues by source, and you can see that our revenues are primarily made up of state aid. 81% of our revenue comes from the state. About 5% from federal, and about 8% from local property taxes. On the next slide, our expenditures in the general fund, about 79% are salary and benefits, and 13% purchase services, and 6% supplies and materials. Okay, any questions on 13-14? All right, let's look at 14-15. And some of the revenue budget assumptions for the general fund. First of all, the general education formula allowance is set to increase $529 for next year. Our compensatory revenue is projected to increase by about $228,000. There's a new revenue, teacher development and evaluation aid, that's about $90,000. And then our state special education aid is projected to go up by about $50,000. And our operating referendum revenue is projected to be about 2.6. That's the passing of the levy last fall. And then all-day kindergarten will now be fully funded. So those are some.
Now, Cleve, could you explain that first one? We're not really getting the increase of 529.
Not all of it is a true increase. Part of it's an offset to some changes with pupil unit calculations. Right. Any other questions on those? Okay, on the expenditure assumptions, all the programs that were proposed last fall with the passing of the levy have been added into the budget. Transportation contract rates will increase by 2.5%. Health insurance rates will increase by 11.6%. We've added summer band camp and summer orchestra lessons. For salaries and fringe benefits, if the contract's been settled, we've put that into the budget. If it hasn't, we've factored in an appropriate amount. We've added a 1.0 orchestra teacher for grades 4 and 5, and then we've decreased our legal fees by about $50,000. Again, some of the major assumptions, there are others in the more detailed document.
I have one comment, and I beg the pardon of my colleagues who have heard this story before. We proposed a number of things for the levy.
Right.
And we have accomplished all of those things, save one that I am aware of. And that one that is missing is we remain the only Big 9 district without media specialists on the secondary level. That was part of the proposal and comments that I used in my support of the levy last fall. And I am not criticizing, we tried to hire some media specialists. We weren't successful in getting appropriate candidates. But I really believe that until we can replace those media specialists, our media centers will not be as powerful a learning tool as they could be. There's over 60 years of research that says a professionally staffed and adequately funded media center improves student achievement in the areas of literacy, research, critical thinking, and as much as we need all the things that the levy is going to provide, I would point out to the community and to my colleagues again that this is the area of the media specialist is one that we haven't solved yet, and I hope we can continue to work on.
Thank you, Tom.
Any other questions or comments on the assumptions? Okay, on the next page then we'll look at the food service assumptions. The federal meal reimbursements rates will remain the same. The state meal reimbursements for reduced price meals increases from 12.5 cents to 52.5 cents per meal. Now, there's a catch that comes with this, or a little hook with it, what that means is that since we're getting more money to cover that reduced price meal, the expectation is that we won't charge those kids anything to have the meal. And that's part of all of the reform or the issues that surrounded hunger that you heard about this winter throughout the legislative session. So those kids currently are paying 40 cents for a lunch. They will pay nothing at this point. The kindergarten breakfast reimbursement rate is also have a significant increase, 55 cents to $1.30. And that also means that we won't charge any of our kindergarten students to eat breakfast. So no one in kindergarten will pay to have a breakfast this next year. We have a 5-cent increase in our per meal charges for lunch to students. And then Sodexo will continue to be our food service provider. In the community service fund, the program fees that we charge are based on projected program costs. The 21st Century Federal Grant was not funded, so both the revenues and the expenditures have been taken out of the budget for that. The district will continue to levy for youth services, after-school enrichment, home visiting, disabled adults, and disabled school-age care. And then state aid increases for early childhood family education and for school readiness have been factored into the budget. There have been some nice increases there. And then in the debt service fund, again, the levies are based on 105% of our debt payments, and the expenditures are based on our bond payment schedules. Any questions on those assumptions? So then the next 5 or so slides go through again the same numbers for each fund. So in the general fund, we're picking up the fund balances that we're projecting for ending this year. So if we're projecting to end at about $9.5 million. Our revenues for next year are projected to be $46.8 million. Our expenditures $46.5 million, and so our fund balance will go up to about 9.9. And most of that increase is not really an increase, it's a smaller deficit in the health and safety fund. If you remember, that fund's in the hole and we're kind of working our way out of that. And because of that process now, that deficit is much less.
There's a one-time revenue source too of the evaluation.
Yes.
Teacher evaluation, that's
Yeah.
not 100,000.
Can you estimate, we've talked often about fund balance percentage. Can you
Yes.
estimate what that
1 year
$9,889,840 figure might represent?
I think it was it 20%? We
Yep.
looked at both where we'll end this year and where we end next year, and one was 20%, so the other one's pretty close to that too.
Thank you.
Well above our policy of minimum of 9.5. Okay, on the food service fund, we're projecting that fund to start out at about $480,000, revenues of a little over $2 million, expenditures a little under $2 million, so that fund balance, we're expecting that to grow a little bit also. In the community service fund, starting out at about $279,000, revenues of $1.6 million, expenditures of $1.6 million, a little bit of a cushion there, so that fund balance will grow to about $345,000. The debt service fund, we start out at about $1 million. We've got revenues of $4.8 million and expenditures of $4.7 million, so that fund balance stays pretty stable. And then our trust fund, we're actually going to, we've kind of picked this up in the last 6 years, and we're probably going to kind of work ourselves out of it again. Because there is a Falcon Trust that has been set up, so we're gonna encourage people to go back to the Falcon Trust with a lot of these donations that we've taken in. It's no sense in duplicating the effort of the Falcon Trust. So next year we would hope that that fund balance would be done. Any questions?
We talked about it, that are we gonna eliminate the trust fund, because I heard it created some difficulty for you in the audit.
It's not a difficulty, it's just another fund to track. Excuse me. And if we have people who give scholarships, and if they want it to be over 3 years, then we're tracking that. And if some kids say they're going to go to school and then don't go to school, then we sit there with that money and then we don't know what to do with it. And the Falcon Trust is already doing all of that, so it just makes sense to.
Are we gonna have a resolution or to eliminate this some future time?
I don't think you need to, but we sure can if you want to.
It might be a good idea to do that, and just,
Direct
it also recognizes the
trust.
good work that the
Yep.
that the Falcon Trust is doing
Right,
too,
yeah.
so it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sure can.
Yeah, I like the idea more of recognizing our consolidation with a program that's there and doing a good job, you know. Sounds like a reasonable thing to do.
So maybe next year at this time, we look at that, get this down to 0, and then look
Yeah.
at a resolution.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, any other questions or comments on those fund balance numbers? The last 3 slides then look at the same graphical information that we saw before. Our expenditures by fund, again, the general fund is the largest share of our expenses, 85%. Community service and food service both represent 3%, and debt service 9%. So if we look at our general fund revenue sources, again, state sources are the largest share of our revenue, 79%. Federal sources 4%. Our local property taxes now make up 12%, which is a little bit of an increase, but that was with the passing of the levy last fall. And then finally, our expenditures by type of expense, salaries and benefits, 80%, purchase services 13%, supplies and materials 4%, and then the rest. So that's a very, very big overview of our budget. Again, you've got the more detailed packet of information. Both of these documents will be on our website for the public to view. And certainly if anybody has any questions, they're very welcome to contact me.
Any more questions for Colleen? All right, so if I understand what we're looking for this evening, it's 2 actions, one to finalize the final budget of 2013-2014, and one to adopt the budget for 2014, the upcoming school year of 2014-15.
Correct.
Is there any reason those can't be a single action?
It can be a single motion.
Single action if we choose to do so. Okay. So I will entertain a motion to approve both the final budget for fiscal year 2013-2014 and the adopted budget for the fiscal year 2014-2015.
So moved.
Is there a second? A motion and a second. Any discussion on this item at this time?
Just a comment, again, there were, I can't tell you how many changes we went through this school year with everything that was going on. But between the cuts and then now the new levy and the ads and just a great amount of work that Colleen and Andy and her staff did. They just really need to be congratulated for getting the budget, first of all, getting the budget balanced this year, which is terrific. And then second of all, I think even more importantly is showing that we did balance the budget for the following year. So, and that's terrific.
We're even a little ahead.
Even a little ahead.
Yeah, outstanding.
I would just support that comment, considering all the changes that came from the legislature, some of them at the last minute. It's really excellent, what you presented.
And I'll just add a thank you to the community, because the levy has meant so much for this process. This is the 6th or 7th process I've been through, and to be able to be a part of discussions of how we're going to add to the district and enhance our programs versus trying to do the least harm with cuts. First time we've been able to do that, and the levy is the key reason. So I, for one, and I think I speak on behalf of most of the board members, are incredibly grateful to the community for that, and I think our schools will be that much better for it. So we are also thankful for that. Any other questions or comments at this time? All right, we do have a motion and a second to adopt these 2 budgets. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all. Okay. Next up is then a resolution regarding the fund balance commitment. Colleen, do you want to talk us through that?
Well, thank you to Yvette for reminding us about this, but it's a resolution that will allow the school district to repay money that we borrowed from the separation and reserve for separation and retirement benefits fund. If you remember a couple of years ago, one of our budget cuts was to take our current year severance costs and pay for that out of that fund balance that we have set aside for those severance costs. That was about $2.5 million at the time, and we borrowed a little over $500,000 from that fund, with the intent that we would repay that when we could. So what this resolution allows us to do is say that at the end of our audit or during our audit process, if the board so chooses, they can choose an amount then to repay into that fund out of the general fund. So we're not asking you to say that you're going to definitely do it, or what dollar amount you need to do, but the way this works is that you have to do this by June 30th. You have to at least state your intent to do it by June 30th. And then as we work through the audit and get final numbers, we can bring you another resolution that will state an amount, if you so choose.
So, Colleen, could you give me, remind me of a little bit of history here? So this is an account that we were asked to set up a number of years ago. I'm not sure, 5 or 6 years ago, seems like
Yep,
shortly after I got
probably
on
about
board.
4 years ago, as we were working through our budget problems at that time and finding some one-time money, not finding, but we had extra one-time money come through. We have an other post-employment benefit liability of about $7 million, and what that means is that if we were to close our doors today, we would still owe our retirees about $7 million in health insurance benefits and severance payments. We're not gonna close our doors, but for most businesses, you're required to set that up and have a separate fund for that, and they have now required school districts to do the same thing. So at the time, we could have passed a bond issue or sold bonds to fund that, and the board chose not to at that time because of where we were at and didn't wanna add that burden to the taxpayers. So we said, okay, we'll try and work at funding that ourselves with extra money as we have it. And so we'd gotten up to $2.5 million and then borrowed from it with the intent, like I said, of paying that back.
So we've been asked to fund this balance, this fund at some point in the amount of roughly $7 million.
Right.
And we're at $2.5 million now. Is there, or I guess we're at about $2 million now.
Yes.
But we've been
Yep.
at 2.5. Is there any timeline? My understanding is there's no timeline or consequences put on us at this point for
No.
creating this fund.
No,
We're asked to do this fund, but there isn't a timeline or consequence.
yep,
Yeah.
no timeline.
I would
Yeah.
just, I don't wanna take full credit because I think Brent Peruka brought this up
Yeah.
Oh,
initially,
okay.
because he was a member when you took the money
Yeah.
out of the
Yeah.
fund. So his opinion was that we should be paying that back as we go forward and we're able to.
Mhm.
And that it could be an issue in future if we were looking at a bonding situation.
Well, what it
to
does,
mention
it's a couple of things. Our financial statements right now show that as an unfunded liability. And so if you're going to sell bonds and companies that are looking at buying your bonds, I mean, we get rated by Standard & Poor's or Moody's
Mhm.
based on our financial statements. So if we have a huge unfunded liability, our rating is not very good, and then
I
you
see.
pay more in interest.
So there could be a
it's-
financial consequence for not
Right.
having it funded in some
Right.
way. Okay.
Well, the other,
That's good to know.
the other piece too that's important to understand is that each year we pay a certain dollar amount for our general fund to provide health insurance benefits and severance payments for teachers or staff. If it's fully funded, then the theory is that that interest we earn from that $7 million will pay for that, and we no longer have to pull that out of our general fund. So I could hire, 4 or 5 more teachers as a result of this being fully funded.
Yeah. And that's maybe the bigger purpose and the better reason why we would want to do that.
Sure. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for recounting all the
Sure.
reasons for that fund. I think it's good for our benefit and also
Yes,
for those
yeah.
watching to recount why there's that fund and why we're talking about transferring any money from the general budget into that
Yep.
fund.
And am I correct in understanding that any transfer that would go into that fund is basically a one-time expenditure?
Yes,
And-
so you would be taking it out of fund balance. really.
Understood, no, I understand that, but it's not a commitment to continue to
Nope.
do that year after year.
Nope.
If we find the fund balance adequate and we would choose to designate a portion of that to this fund, those are one-time decisions, they're not, and
Yep.
again, ultimately, the goal being $7 million
Yep.
to fund it and then reduce any, any deficits or demands on the general fund.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And again, remember, it's a committed fund, so if we ever have a situation where we need that money, we can pull it back, just
Sure.
like we did a few years ago. So
Mm.
it's nice to put it in there, but it's not it's a two-way door. It can come back out.
Excellent. Okay. All right, any further questions or comments on this resolution? All right, I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 1405, the fund balance commitment.
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second,
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? This is a resolution and as such requires a roll call, so Madam Clerk, if you would please do so.
Tom Casper,
Aye.
myself, I, Yvette Marthaler,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jason Huber.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. Next up then, we have item 8C, budget. You can see the latest enrollment report, which seems to have come in right around where we would have projected. What does that June number represent, Colleen? Is it simply some finalized numbers from the numbers that there were for the few days
Just
that we had school in
a June
June?
1 count, whatever, yep, it's the same as a May 1st or April 1st, it's just the first of the month count. So not the final numbers, although we did get our first, what we call Mars report, which is really the final numbers. We did get our first one today, and we're very, 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 very close to what we projected, so I think
And
we'll
so
get it.
July will have a final number for us for,
Probably not till August,
okay. Excellent.
yeah, or October, or January is when the superintendent really signs off. But it's very close at this point,
Excellent, okay.
so.
Great, thank you. Any questions on the enrollment report? Okay, thank you, Colleen. We also have a financial report showing us where our expenditures are for this time of the year. Any questions or comments on that financial report? Hearing none, then next, we have consider of approval of gifts and donations. We have a number of gifts in front of us this evening for approval, and I will read through them all to recognize those who have made donations to our school district. So they are from the Wells Fargo Foundation Educational Matching Gift Program, the amount of $35 for a donation for Faribault Middle School Choir. Next is the Fern Westerhouse Memorial donation in the amount of $515. Donation for the general fund per the family of Fern Westerhouse. Next, the Fraternal Order of the Eagles in the amount of $320 for the SOAR Assembly Awards. And an anonymous donation in the amount of $1,000 for the purchase of books for the Roosevelt Media Center and to increase the book collection in the grades in the 4-2 classroom at Roosevelt. As always, we thank all of these organizations and individuals who have stepped forward to support our programs within the school district. We thank you for your donations, both large and small, and we'll be sending out a letter of thanks to all of these organizations. I'll entertain a motion to approve these gifts at this time.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve these gifts. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, other committee reports. We have no insurance committee report this evening. Do we have a wellness committee report? Anne-Marie?
Good evening, everyone. So our wellness team met a couple of weeks ago, and we came up with a theme for the staff wellness for 55021, which is the zip code of Faribault. And it's a campaign to get staff to recognize some really healthy ways of living and activities. So the first 5 would be ways to well-being, which would be something like connect with families and friends, be active, take notice, and be present in the moment, keep learning, and give. So that's the first 5 of the 55021. The second 5 has to do with servings of fruits and vegetables per day, which is always a good reminder that that's what we're supposed to do. 0 is the servings of beverages with added sugar. We want 0 of those. 2 is limit your screen time to 2 hours a day. That's going to be tough for me.
You think, Richard?
1 hour of
Would you,
activity.
can I ask a question?
Please do, yeah.
screen time, does that mean computer, TV?
Yes. It's just a guideline.
Smartphone,
Smartphone.
Smartphones?
Mr. Sesker was there, he saw that I was having a hard time with that one, so.
Yeah, I didn't have any problem with it.
Right, he didn't have any problem with it. And the one is for 1 hour of activity per day. And as teachers and staff in our buildings, they're always moving around. So they can even count that time towards their 1 hour of activity. So that's kind of the framework for the staff wellness plan going forward this year. It's 55021, very locally based, hoping to roll that out and also kind of tag it on to students eventually as well. But we really have to see how this is implemented and received by our staff first. So that's the plan. And the wellness team will get back together in August to figure out how to roll this out. Todd, would you like to comment on this?
Well, I just want to thank Janet Muth for bringing it forward to us at the Wellness Committee. So it was a nice discussion.
It was
It was
a
good.
really good discussion. It's a really good team, so.
Yes. Well, it sort of already has, so
Yeah.
we're sort of copying a little bit.
Yeah. And that's it for the wellness report. Questions?
Is it doable?
I don't know, we'll see. You know, we have goals, incentives, details around this, so we'll have to just kind of roll this out and see how it goes. If the incentives are to have Mr. Sesker volunteer in your classroom for an hour or something like that, it might be very motivating to staff.
That would be nice, get him in the
Yes,
classroom.
exactly, yeah. I mean, he likes being there, so that would be perfect.
He's well-trained.
Yes, well trained.
Although kindergarten can be a challenge for
I was
us.
just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
I'd say put him in kindergarten.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll make sure. We'll make sure. Okay. Any other questions around wellness?
Hearing none, I think we can move on to the community ed report then.
Okay, so just some general updates. Kindergarten Academy with 27 students in STEAM are going really well. They're going strong. The St. Olaf Science Alliance is working with our 4th graders this week with hands-on activities centered on green energy and how things work in terms of how green energy works in our life nowadays. Very fun. There are other things going on that are just really hands-on activities. It's all going really well. 355 students approximately. We had some students just show up, and we were very welcoming to those students, and some students that just haven't shown up. So it's been kind of a balance and a wash at about 350 students. So it's going really well. I encourage you to all take a look either at Roosevelt or the middle school. With enrichment, I wanted to report out, there was an article in the newspaper this past Saturday that talked about the introduction of Red Cross swimming lessons, which is not new to Faribault High School and through community education, but is something that has been lacking in the last few years. And we brought it back. Becky Lippert and Tina Madsen has really spearheaded that effort, and we had over 80 kids sign up for the first session. And we'll have that again going forward. So it's just a really fun activity, and it's really introducing that safety aspect to having so much water around us in Minnesota, as proved by last week, I think. So, yes, so we want those kids to be safe.
It's part of the training for flash flood.
We should have a whole week on that. So that's really kudos to Becky and Tina. I just wanted to update you, United Way in Faribault has given community education a few grants, swimming lessons. We got $1,000 from them to provide scholarships for students in need. McKinley, we have $6,000 for busing, so that's very helpful going forward. And for our Families and School Together program, which is an integrated district activity, we also received $1,000 to support that program. So United Way was very generous to us this year, and we thank them. McKinley received another early learning pathway scholarship scholarship funding grant of $61,000. So we'll be providing Kindergarten Academy again next year. So that's exciting.
I just wanted, before you go
Yes.
further, I just wanted to comment on the article in the Red
Yes.
Wing, in the Faribault Daily News, and the wonderful written work of our own reporter here,
Yes.
Molly, did a nice job with that article, so thanks, Molly. So, sorry about that.
No, please, that's great. I just have a few more things. Youth development, we received some funding from South Central College through the Office of Higher Ed to create a program called Accelerating to Success. And that is focused on incoming 11th and 12th graders that are struggling with their test scores and academic performance. We're implementing a summer career exploration program, 2 weeks. We already have industry partners and the college staffing that. We have the ALC, which is the Area Learning Center, after school reading and math classes aligned with South Central College's college readiness classes, if I can get all of that out. And so those students will be better prepared if they do enter the MINSCU system in terms of placing at a higher level within their system. They will receive high school credit for those classes. So we're just aligning the curriculum a little bit better. And we're also going to deliver a 1-credit class for first year experience through our CAST program. And those same students will get 1 credit, and it's a class that's really dedicated to learning and navigating the higher ed system. So financial aid, life online, all of those things that we know our students need to be prepared for to be successful in college. And yes,
When will that be offered during,
say that one more time.
when will that class be offered?
In August.
In August.
Yep.
for the summer program.
Yep. So the career exploration will be happening in August, then the classes of the other coursework will be happening throughout the year after school. Yeah,
Thank you.
yes, you're welcome. Kids World is finalizing their accreditation. Again, Todd has been really instrumental in making sure that that moves forward, and we are close to having our site visit, and that will hopefully be positive, and we'll finalize that. And I don't know, Todd, if you wanted to talk about the engaging Somali families and student success, if you wanted to do that later, or if you
We can
wanted-
do that, let's do that later.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep.
Well, that's it. I could go on. Very positive news. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. All right. Next, we are on other matters. And this includes, beginning with the approval of a special work session on July 7th in order for the school board. It'll be a single item work session, and it'll be another meeting for this board to discuss right, hang on a second. Are there 2 things listed here? Because the July 7th is a work session for us to discuss the potential for moving our administrative building to a new location. And then also for us to discuss the possibility of a public forum. Would the board like to set a date and time for a public forum this evening? Would you prefer to wait for that special work session to do so? Wait for the special work session to do so? Is that a feeling of the board?
I think you're gonna have to too, because I don't know if I'll have all the numbers
Sure.
for that yet, so,
Okay. We'll have a better sense of when we can do that.
yeah, yep.
I think as long as we know, what's this, required by law is, 7 days? Probably not that many, but if we had a week of notice, there's plenty of
Right.
time for us to advertise that.
Yep.
To make sure the public know about the date. Okay. So at this time, we need to, I think we're really just approving the one date, the July 7th date, to add a work session that is not currently scheduled for 5:30 p.m. At the High School Media Center. Any questions or comments on that?
Well, I'd just like to comment that that session, like other school board sessions, are open to the public. So if someone has an interest in this topic that we're going to be looking into, the possible creation of a administrative center, perhaps probably attached to the high school. By doing so, we update our facilities. We are ultimately getting out of our leased, or at least most of our leased spaces, and will ultimately result in a lowering of taxes to our taxpayers. So it's and very interesting, and I think an important topic, and I would encourage, even though there's not a lot of interaction at the work session, but at least it would be a chance for community members to gain some information, and that would be followed up again by probably a public forum at a future time.
All right. Any other questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion to approve this work session then.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve a special work session on July 7th. That's a Monday at 5:30 p.m. at the High School Media Center. Any further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And I think for anybody watching, you can anticipate an additional public forum date should the board decide to go forward in any fashion or consider more formally the possibility of moving forward with this. We will certainly have at least one public forum to discuss this item.
I guess we can just clarify why we are moving forward in July with this issue, if we haven't discussed this at a public meeting before. Our lease agreements are.
The timing of this, yes, thank you,
exactly,
yeah. Superintendent Sesker, do you wanna say that? We're gonna talk about this in a little bit too. There is an
Yep.
agenda item related to this. Maybe then if we just make sure that we cover that, and then,
Thank you.
Just
make
remind
sure
you
that we
if I-
put that all
if I don't-
together.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Any other questions or comments on this item? Have we voted? We did, okay, I'm sorry. Normally discussion is
I
done
should've-
after we
yes,
vote.
I'm sorry.
So that threw me off there.
I did.
It's okay, that's
Sorry
appropriate.
about that, apologize.
That's okay. Next item is to consider the approval of the 2014-15 student handbooks for Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. Any questions or comments on
And the
these?
middle school.
And the middle school, I'm sorry. The high school is absent at this moment. I'm assuming they are still working on theirs, is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep, correct, and then the ALC. Yep, correct, Alternative Learning Center in high school. In McKinley, yeah.
That'll be in July,
How about McKinley?
Yeah, and McKinley.
Oh, McKinley.
in
Yep.
July, yeah. It was because of the addition of the bullying policy
Sure.
that it, that came later,
Sunday
so
morning.
they were not able to be on the June agenda. Those other schools.
Now, are these, these will be online, right?
Yes.
Now, are we gonna produce paper copies?
We have in the past given a copy to, for example, the middle school, the new students, if they have an older brother or sister that are already in middle school, then we don't give it to them. But we do provide copies to kids. We've talked about just putting it online for access for parents, and we haven't quite figured that all out yet. If that's something that you are okay with, we can pursue that further, I guess, too.
Cause, with everything's online, smartphones and
It's a lot of copies. We have to make a lot of paper copies.
even though they can only spend 2 hours a day on the screen.
Yeah, right.
But just to clarify,
Be an exception.
Richard, are you, just to clarify what you're suggesting, I think certainly they can be online. Are you suggesting in lieu of paper copies or in
No.
addition to paper copies? Is this,
To eliminate paper copies.
you're thinking about replacing paper copies with
Right,
only
exactly.
online copies? Okay, I just wanna clarify that. I wasn't clear for sure.
Saves money, plus it's
Yeah.
always there to say, oh, I lost it, the dog ate it.
Yep.
It
Yeah.
is on each
It's-
school's website.
It is on, it
Yes.
should be, that's where you should look.
Yeah, it is.
It is, but we
Student
don't, I think what we're saying is that we don't need to make paper copies. too.
Right, but it is.
In-
Thousands
It
and
is.
thousands.
Are we
Unless
still doing paper
requested.
copies, but?
We are, yep. In
We are
fact,
still
the
doing
middle
paper.
school, if you approve it tonight, is gonna go to press tomorrow.
That was the urgency. to
Yep.
have it
Do we
in.
know what the cost is of approving it? See, I guess personally, I'm a little reluctant to eliminate paper copies. I certainly want it online, but I think the more ways in which we try to communicate, the better. I'm really hesitant to cut one method of communication, unless there's a serious need to think about a budgetary constraint on that. I don't know how much we're talking about here, but
It's
But if
probably
it's-
pretty minimal for costs, but I
if
mean,
it's
it's still
on
a
the order
cost.
of $1,000 or less, which is my gut guess here, seems like that's a small price for making sure that we
Mhm.
create an additional line of communication. So this is just my personal thought on this. I don't know.
One additional thing, the high school is going to a different type, they're gonna be having a, plan book or
It's a little bit different format than.
format, including the student handbook. So it'll be a different style.
Sort of a workbook aspect to it, is that what I'm
I
understanding?
believe so.
In addition to
They'll
that?
be providing that for the July meeting.
Any other questions or comments on?
Well, I'm reluctant on getting rid of the written copy also, especially this year for the bullying policy. There's some major
It's a big
issues
change.
coming up, and I feel better making sure every student at least gets a copy of that to try to get it to be home because of all the legalities involved in some of the policy changes that are coming up.
So I was gonna make a comment, and I'm not sure, this is almost certainly not a comment to think about for this year, but it's something I would like to get some serious attention for next year. I feel like our handbooks have become less user-friendly over my time on the board. They've begun, when we say student handbook, this says to me that a student might be able to sit down and read through this, and it's a handbook for them. And at the elementary level, I think it's virtually impossible for a student to sit down and read through this handbook right now and gain much of anything from it. And I think much of that is because we're writing this almost in sometimes in lieu of policy, so we're trying to be very precise. But I'm not sure there's much of a user-friendly aspect to this, that a family could sit down and look at 2 or 3 pages and have a sense of where they sit. So what I suspect then happens is that it doesn't get read. You know, once you start making a document that has everything in it. And so, so that's a challenge, as a balancing act, and I guess it's something I'd like some thought to be put into. How can this be made user-friendly? Is it an introduction, a few pages, sort of the highlights of what we need to make sure they see with everything else on there after that? I'm not sure what the answer is to that, because I think as you look through this, you'd be hard pressed to say that these things aren't important, that there's much in here that we don't want in there. I think it's, with all due respect to our state legislature, I think the fact that we just, added 6 more pages to our handbook because we had to put in the entire bullying policy, which I would suggest nobody can read. It's ridiculous. But that we're required to do, and we're not gonna get away from some of those things, but I think it would be helpful, I think, to put some time to thinking through, is this a document that anybody's going to look at? And I suspect right now it's not. And I have concerns about that.
And just so you know, the principals do go through this in more of a layman's term with all the kids at the beginning of the school year when they visit with the kids in their respective area. So they do actually summarize the handbook and go through it and clarify those different items for it. But they don't have a short annotations for the handbook, and maybe that's what we need as a quick summary, although you have to provide both. It'd be
Right, yeah,
adding
I
more
don't
pages
suggest that,
if you do
again.
the annotations too.
Yeah, I
That's the
don't
hard part.
suggest, we're required to put in the bullying policy, we're not gonna get rid of those 7 pages. But if we can state a bullying policy in a paragraph in addition to that to really help what it is we're looking for there, I think those are important things to do. Communication is important, but if it's not good communication, it can be worse than no communication sometimes.
Are you suggesting something along the lines of the Cliff's Notes to the student handbook?
Yeah, perhaps that's the suggestion. Maybe somebody has a better idea for it. That's the thing that comes to my mind at this moment is, because I suspect as I look through this, my glancing at this is, I don't look at this and feel like, well, there's nothing here. There's lots of things here we could just cut out. It's important information, and I think it does need to be available. I think it can be online, but I also think it's a document that very few parents, I suspect, get a 20-page handbook and start reading through it.
But we do get parents that will refer to it if there is an
Absolutely,
incident, and
which is why I think it needs to be there.
right,
Absolutely.
and they'll pinpoint you right down.
But
to
I
it.
think it would be nice to have a 2 or 3 page document that I think is more encouraging to people to read before a problem shows up and suddenly they're worried about what the attendance policy is or something like that. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Sesker, is that I don't think they really read it unless they get a call from a principal and saying,
Right.
tardiness or bullying,
Mhm.
then they can go to online and say, what is the policy? No, you cannot hit somebody or something like that.
It is, it's a resource for
Right.
parents. They don't read it out necessarily right away, but they do refer to it if they do have a question about what a decision of
So I
principals
would
is.
say most people or most parents do not really read it unless they get a call. then they go online, it's probably better online. I don't know if it's easy to, pick out a subject online.
But there are things here that I would like parents to see, even if they don't run into a problem. And I just think if it could be in a more user-friendly manner, we might be able to pick out the highlights that we want every parent to have seen and put that into a 2 or 3 page user-friendly document, a Cliff's Notes document attached to that. Not a suggestion for this year.
Could the elementary schools have one with just a couple additions for their own particular school? too? I don't
They've
know if
done
they have
that this year.
Is that pretty
We're
much?
much closer to
I
that.
mean,
That was
that
something
was
that we asked for quite a few
unbelievable.
years, that it took a
Yeah.
little while to get them
Do it last.
to be on the same
Yeah.
page with their
This
handbooks.
I mean, they
Yeah,
look
this
the
is-
same, but I didn't know if they all work together and didn't
Yep, they
separately.
should be
have
all
these
together.
differences.
Yeah.
I know Terry Ronan has worked very hard on the handbooks to get for the elementary schools, and he made a comment at the policy committee about, isn't there some way I can put a shorter version of the bullying policy with referring them to the website? And we said, sorry, no. But he is in agreement that
Right,
that
right.
it is
We've come
sort of
full
a-
circle, I think, back in the earlier days, we didn't have to have all these details. Now we seem to have to.
Question for Deb, is that they have to have the copy of the bullying policy in hand?
correct.
It's to be
I
in
mean,
the
paper
handbook.
copy or on, what does the statute
Oh,
say?
that, it just says they have to have a copy of the bullying policy.
Now, what does copy mean?
So that's up in the air, the government never,
So we could refer,
I suppose however we're distributing the handbook, whatever we call the
correct.
handbook, it needs to be in.
Correct.
but not on.
but
the-
from my professional business, if you have a piece of paper, you're more likely to read it than me saying, here's your information online, go read it. When you have to do with medications, written word, me handing it to you, you're more than likely going to read it to get all that extra information I want you to have, than me say, go to this website and read it. So when there's major changes, like in the bullying policy, it's better that I hand every parent something saying, here you go, there's been a major change. You know, in years to come, when things have calmed down, then yeah, going totally online would be the best way to go.
Well, and then also, on top of that, the policy says the policy must be given to each school employee and independent contractor
Right.
who regularly interacts with students at the time of initial employment with the school district. So that's another piece for HR that we have to do now, starting July 1st.
Or was given as that paper, or say, go to this, here's a piece of paper, here's a website.
It says given a copy.
I mean, it could be a disc, I suppose, you can give
Right,
a, or
but you
a
have to give them something.
drive, a flash drive,
Okay,
But-
so it's still,
yep,
Eventually, it will get better,
Yeah.
but,
but that's what it says now.
so, but like I said, in personal, it's better to give you something to read than just telling you to go someplace.
It does say, though, that this policy shall be available to all parents and other school community members in an electronic format in the language appearing on the school district's or school's website. So we don't have to give it to all the parents. So that can be accessed with the school district website, it's just that the kids all have to have it.
Which is hard in
Yeah.
elementary school.
Explain it to a kindergarten.
Well, I didn't intend to make the handbooks a major debating point. I think they're actually a fairly straightforward item, but I do think there's some nice things for us to think about as we move forward on them.
I do have a couple things
Please.
though. Once again, the elementaries is wonderful, but there's some discrepancies on employees' names. The school nurse, I don't know what her last name really is now. Lori.
At the elementary school. Oh, Lori could have. Yeah.
Well, one place it has one name, and then
Oh,
it's something
it's-
else on today's agenda. So I don't know which one it's supposed to be. So
should you give
that's-
titles rather than names?
Well, this is just, it's the changes, and it says health information, new language in this section per her. I suppose we could do, you
Title.
know, her title, but there was something else earlier in the agenda that said Johnson.
Yeah, I caught it.
Okay,
We'll get those changed.
and then I couldn't remember which one was supposed to go. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any further discussion on these items? I don't remember, do we have a motion and a second? I don't remember one, all right. I will entertain a motion to approve, the handbooks for Jefferson, Lincoln, Roosevelt, and the Fairville Middle School.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all. Next is the health and safety budget. Who's going to present that to us?
Well, briefly, it used to be an old form called Attachment 99, but it's basically a policy that we have to pass now. It's, we have to do this in order to qualify for our health and safety dollars. And the budget for each of those different health and safety components are in there for us. We try to keep it as steady as we can so we don't change the taxes. This is a levy for our different areas. So if you look at, I believe it's page, oh, it's actually on the first page, that budget, where you have physical hazards, hazardous substance management, asbestos, and so on. You can look at fiscal year 2014, the current fiscal year, and compared to 2015, we try to stay as close as we can with those dollar amounts so we don't change that levy. So that's what we're approving for 2015 for health and safety dollar amounts in those respective categories. Okay, so we'll use those repairs that we've been approved through the Department of Education and use that money that we levy in order to make those. For example, the asbestos removal is $20,000. That's the Jefferson asbestos removal. And that'll be part of that health and safety levy.
Any questions or comments on this item? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the health and safety budget. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, so next on the agenda is for an update on the district office and adult basic ed building. Thoughts and the stage that we're at this point. Superintendent Sesker, would you like to bring us up to date of it?
Yeah, the finances are still the same. The quick example is rent versus own. If you purchase or build the property over a 15-year period of time, the lease would be about $200,000 per year. And if you extend that lease to 20 years, the difference of the 15 and the 20 years, it's a 5-year gap. You would continue paying that lease for another 5 years, so that'd be another $1 million that taxpayers would pay. If you purchase it and borrow for 15 years, then you'd be done. You wouldn't have to pay that extra year 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So the long term, and of course if you go beyond 20 years, you're saving another $100,000, $200,000 per year. So the rent versus buy says that if you can buy or build a property, borrow money for 15 years, even with the interest, you're still going to be money ahead after that whole piece. So that's just the rent versus buy thing. So the consideration that we took, or we looked at, was does it make sense for us to build, in addition to the high school or a separate standalone building, and relocate the district offices and the adult basic ed? We have to do something, otherwise we just stay in our system. We can't just give the money back, because otherwise the district office staff and the adult basic ed staff won't have anywhere to go. So there has to be some sort of structure to house for this whole thing to work. So the rent versus buy was talked about at the last time, and so that's still relevant. The other thing was the savings in taxes, as Mr. Casper was talking about. Each year we levy for these buildings about $200,000 a year. So by the time you do the financing, it's actually about a savings of maybe $120,000 per year of taxes for the taxpayer with that lease levy. So again, over 15 years, $100,000 times 15 is the savings you're going to end up with for the taxpayer. So not only does the rent versus buy make sense, but also the tax savings. And the way that it would be financed is we have some money in our operating capital that we would use to pay the mortgage. So we wouldn't need to go to the voters to pay for this. We'd pull it out of our own general fund. So a lot of those things work very well together. Again, in order to do this, it's either we stay in our own home or we look at these options, because there's no other way we can save this unless we relocate the district office and the adult basic ed. So just to say, well, just give the money back doesn't work, because again, I have to emphasize, there has to be a place where the adult basic ed and the district office people go, okay? So the options that we looked at so far were, do we attach something to the high school? And the reason why we're choosing a high school for now is it's centrally located, and it's a nice place for the district office to be, because they're centrally located within the entire district, and that's something that the board wanted us to take a look at too. The other option that we looked at, or that we are looking at, is having a standalone. And for example, not saying that this would happen, but if you looked at where the tennis courts are and you relocate the tennis court somewhere and you put something at that spot and you assume you figured out the parking, you could look at a price for what a standalone would be for about 25,000 square feet. So we're going to look at that too for a price. And then the last thing that came up that the finance committee wanted me to take a look at was actually a purchase of a town square or another place that was centrally located. And town square seemed to be the logical place right now. It's for sale, and we're taking a look at that. I don't know how feasible that is right now, because you'd have a purchase price, but then you would also have to do a lot of remodel as well. So that just came up within the last week or so we're looking at some dollar amounts with that as well. So regardless of what you choose, we want to make sure that the financial pieces make sense, and we want to make sure also that the location makes sense for the district office staff. The board saw a presentation at the last work session of, was it 4 or 5 architects? 4 architects that looked at some proposals anyways to see, at least give the board a visual of what these office spaces could look like. And hopefully at that next work session we'll get more details with some dollars and cents what all 3 options will look like, and then the board can make a decision on which way they want to pursue. Probably again going to that public comment meeting makes sense right away, so we can get some comments from the public too about this whole project, and try to answer the questions with how the financing all works. It's not magic financing. It's just, again, rent versus buy, and then we can save the taxpayers a couple of bucks. Why not look into it? So, okay.
There was a question about our leasing and why we're looking at getting this done in the near future.
As far as the leasing piece, yeah, right now we pay about, and Colleen, I might have you come up too just to help out with some numbers. The leasing amount, we again pay for adult basic ed space, and we also pay for our district office space, and the amount we pay for those 2 spaces is about $200,000 per year.
But we have an option coming up, right, continue those leases.
Yeah, and our
So
leases
The
go
timing is
ahead.
what.
The timing, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah.
You want to talk about
We're
that?
currently in those 2 leases until June 30th of 2016. So we've got 2 years, and that's probably what it would take by the time you do all the planning and the purchasing and the arranging of the financing, and it would probably take a year for construction. So that's why we don't want to delay it too much more, because we really do need to move ahead and with this at this point if we're going to have something ready by July 1st of 2016.
We want to do our due diligence too, so we wanted to make sure that we took a look at properties that were for sale that were out there too, to renovate and to see if that falls within the budget amount, as well as a standalone and attachment to a high school.
So to clarify for anybody watching, much of the information that Superintendent Sesker just discussed is not new information for the board. We've had a couple of work session meetings which are open to the public, so we invite people to come, but they are not televised, so a lot fewer people see those. So we asked Todd this evening to reiterate some of that same information, so the board has heard much of this before, although some of the information is new, and we're continuing to work on this and look at some questions. So thank you, Superintendent Sesker, for bringing this to us again. I had a question regarding the idea of purchasing an already standing property and issues that might bring up, and I don't expect answers necessarily at this moment, but things I think that we'll need to think about. At least in one example, with the town square example, it struck me that there's a potential there for us to purchase a building which is actually much more square footage than we have a need for, which leaves much more square footage which could be rented out. And I guess that's the question I wanted to bring up. I'm unaware, but maybe it's just my ignorance, of governmental agencies renting property and becoming part of that, and how that might work. And maybe you know something about that now or later. I'd like to hear about that. So, I'd be curious just to hear about the logistics of that, number one. But number two, even if the logistics are there, then I have a second question, which is, how does, if I'm a building owner in town and renting commercial space, I'm not sure how I feel about competing against a government agency for the for rental property within the community. If there's a feeling that taxpayers are supplementing that property so that school district can lower their prices below anybody else, then so that's a concern that I think we would need to think through carefully if an option like that came through, that I'd want to hear from community members who might have that concern. I think there's some really huge pros of going that route, so I don't mean to negate that, but those are questions that I could easily see coming up that I think we need to look into. I don't know if you have thoughts on that top of the head, or if that's just something for us to think about.
We've done some research on that too, especially with as far as a public entity renting out private space. And Colleen, what did you find out?
Minnesota statute allows school districts, if they have excess space, to lease that out to anyone else, really. And the only trouble is that if you are financing it with tax exempt financing, then you run into some trouble leasing. So if that's the intent, we have to know that up front when we go to arrange our financing, because then we would not probably be able to do tax exempt financing. So we just have to be careful. And I've got the financial consultants working a little bit on that to give us our options for that.
So that makes our financing options a little less desirable, but that might be balanced by the ability to rent space out and such.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in the end, you're still gonna get this great space or get a great space and
And I
be able to
suspect-
make it work financially.
I suspect that's in place for the exact sort of reason I was just discussing. If I don't get tax exempt financing to purchase property to rent out if I'm a private business owner, and so it puts the school district at an unfair competitive advantage, and so.
Yeah, and I think we do have to be, I do want it to be very clear that we're, to the public, because we haven't really talked about this in a public setting, that we're not going to be going out for a bond issue for this.
Right.
That this is not going to add to your taxes. As a matter of fact, it's going to reduce your taxes. We're gonna finance it with existing funds, or we're gonna borrow money that we can then pay back with our existing funds. So I think the public needs to be aware of that this is not a bond issue that you'll have to vote on. It's not an increase to your taxes.
And I would also say that, we're paying rent right now about $200,000 a year. We'd still be paying the same amount for the mortgage, or probably a little bit less for this whole thing. So when people say that, oh, there we go spending again, you're spending the same dollar amounts. That's why the taxes are going down.
Yeah, and it's gonna end at some point.
Right.
On the lease space, would we pay property tax?
No. And that's the other question that we had. That will come off the tax rolls for the city if we own it versus a private individual, because we don't pay real estate taxes on it.
That's what Jason was mentioning, if, per square foot,
Yes.
we could deduct that, then it's maybe an unfair advantage to lease it to whatever, because we can take out the property tax. Now, is that fair or not?
Well, I don't know that, we haven't worked out all the financing
know.
details, but my thought is that it's not gonna be cheap to renovate that building. So I don't know that the rent would necessarily be any cheaper than any other place in town.
And that's my concern with an existing building,
Yeah,
we got issues with asbestos and,
Mm-hmm.
what's the shape of the roof and mechanical systems, also we're buying
yeah.
problems with it, because a lot of times when people or companies sell, maybe there's problems, we don't wanna put money into it, so let's dump it on the market.
That would all have to be looked at before we would
Yes,
just
of course.
make an offer.
Well, on the other hand, you could say you're helping the community if you're looking at a building that's not being
Right.
used
Yeah.
effectively at this time. I mean, if the city is, if we could make improvements to a standing building that's not being used fully at this time, that could also benefit the community.
We're not in that business.
Well, I'm just,
We're not in that.
We are a member of the community,
I-
so I would say,
I would say
I
we're trying
would
to
say we are in that
benefit
business.
the community as a whole, as part of our school district is trying to do that.
I think it's gotta make financial sense for us, there's no
Yeah,
question, I mean, that's,
absolutely. I mean,
it's
I'm
gotta
agreeing
make
with you
financial
on
sense
that.
for us. We're not in the business of supplementing the
agree with
community,
that,
I think
yes.
that's absolutely true, but I agree that there could be some extra positives here of taking a building that's been pretty underutilized in this community, and I think doesn't have the best face on it, facing the community, if that's true someplace, then that could be great, but I think on balance, there's lots of things to look at here, and I appreciate your starting to look into those issues, and we'll keep examining them. No decisions are made here tonight.
No, we still have a ways to go with that exam. It may be way out of our price range, so it may not be something we can do, but it's always good to look.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, any other questions on this item at this moment? So again, for the community watching, there will be more discussions on this. Our next work session will be focused on this. That will not be broadcast, but and it is an open meeting, as all board meetings are, so you are welcome to attend. To reiterate, that is on July 7th at 5:30 p.m. There will also be a public forum on that, so there will be much more discussion on this. And as a board, we've made no final decisions, and we're still actively pursuing much information, so I hope you see that here tonight as we ask some of these questions and consider what the options are for the best for the school district. Okay, any further questions on that item? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 11, other items of information. Our student representative is not with us this evening, so that brings us to school board members. Any items of information?
Well, I will say I attended the Somali education event. It was a great event put on by community ed. There were a lot of parents. There was a lot of information shared, a great turnout, and great dinner as well. So it's very positive.
I would echo that. It went very, very well.
Any further items from school board members? Hearing none, superintendent.
It's been a very busy week, and the main focus that we've been, weeks I guess, the main focus has been the hiring process. And just to let you know that we have, Mr. Palmer is going to be the Lincoln Elementary Principal this year. We've opened up the Jefferson Principalship, so I want to make sure people know that. We're going to look at possible interviews Thursday to interview that principal position, so that's a real big hire for the district. Other than that, I tried to count, I lost count after about 30 new staff that we're hiring this spring. It's just been a really heavy pace for the principals and Nicole to keep up with, and it's been a very good situation that we've had compared to years past, so we're still pulling our hair out, but it's for a good reason this time, and we're hiring some very good staff members, and so that's really what we've been busy with. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you. All right, then that brings us to our final item, item 12, dates to remember. On July 7th at 5:30 p.m., as we've said a number of times, we'll have the special work session, which will be held at the High School Media Center. On July 21st at 7:30 a.m. will be our finance meeting in the district office. On July 28th at 6:30 p.m., we'll have our next regular board meeting right back here at Faribault City Hall Council Chambers. And with that then is item 13, adjournment. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made.